I had seen the movie Stripes, so I knew absolutely everything I needed to know about the United States Army.
Yeah.
So I enlisted. I knew I wasn't ready to go to college.
Hello, my name is Blake Furman. I'm the founder for Veterans Navigation Network, a 501c3 nonprofit in Billings, Montana. We help veterans and their family members connect to the resources and benefits they've earned through their service. Through that work, we get to meet a lot of great people, community members, and businesses that do great things for our communities, for veterans, and for their families. And today I'm here to talk to one of those such people, David Redmon.
Good morning.
How are you doing today, Dave?
I am doing super.
Awesome. Well, thank you for agreeing to be here today. Thanks for being willing to meet and talk about your military service, but also how you impact veterans in our community.
Sounds good.
So you have a pretty long military career. You know, I only did 4 years in the Ranger Regiment, but you had a lot longer military service. So tell me a little bit and tell our audience a little bit about your military service, what that looked like for you.
Absolutely. You know, I was one of those Cold War veterans when things started. I enlisted in California. The Army was my ticket to leave California. I had seen the movie Stripes, so I knew absolutely everything I needed to know about the United States Army.
Yeah.
So I enlisted. I knew I wasn't ready to go to college, but also knew that the biggest way to get yourself in trouble is to just kind of hang out. So that commercial "be all you could be" was a fairly effective marketing one, especially for me. So I enlisted, and after going through their programs, all that they really offered me were things in military intelligence. So I decided I would go ahead and do that. First duty assignment was off in Germany. It was during the Cold War, so my first one was to listen to communications coming across the Iron Curtain and develop insights and do that. The second part of my career was probably tied to what was going on with the Balkans, with Bosnia and Kosovo. And then after all of that happened, there was this thing, 9/11, that happened, and I think every veteran at the time that was in the service had to decide whether that's what they were going to do or whether they wanted to go on to other opportunities and give back in other ways. I decided that I would go ahead and stick around. So the last part of my career was all defined by what was going on in the Middle East primarily. I did finish as a leader at U.S. Cyber Command and the National Security Agency and Central Security Service out in the D.C. area, and then after 35 years of active service came back to my wife's home state of Montana, which I had adopted back in 1989.
Yeah. So, I mean, just an incredible life of service. What really, I mean, you mentioned the slogan, you know, be all you can be or be the best that you can be with the Army. It's changed so many times over the years. But what really got you to enlist? What inspired you to join the military?
You know, I think, a lot of folks will say it's about finding something bigger than yourself. But there's also a group of veterans where, you haven't, or young Americans where you haven't really figured out what you want to do, right? And you want this idea of, it's time to leave home, but at the same time, it's the scariness of how am I gonna pay for rent? What am I gonna do? And for me, there was a little bit of intrigue of this intelligence thing, but for the most part, it really was I haven't a clue. Right, so mine was somewhat on a whim. I filled out one of those brochures that came in the mail and got a call from a recruiter, and I was having some challenges finishing high school. And the recruiter helped me get that done. And the rest just kind of, as they say, was history.
Yeah.
But no greater sense of purpose, just knew that I needed to do something with my life, and giving it a shot through the Army was a good starting point.
Yeah. So I imagine 35 years of service in the military, you have to have some pretty memorable stories that stick out to you. Would you mind sharing just one of those with us?
How about two?
Okay.
Right, so the first one, you look back on what was that time in the service before 9/11. And one of the things that you could do in Germany was, as a result of the armistice or the end of World War II, service members could go into East Berlin. You had to put on your dress uniform, and it was an agreement between the French, the Brits, the Russians, and us. So this notion of passing through Checkpoint Charlie, going from this big Technicolor thing that was West Berlin into this black and white drab world of East Berlin. And you'd go and see some of the Russian cemeteries and wander around the town, but just this vivid memory of, all right, this is what I'm here to do, which is try and ensure that not everything becomes gray, that we can keep our world in high Technicolor. And so that was kind of one memory that always will stick out with me. Yeah. And then I think the next was when I served in Afghanistan. We had Afghans that were assigned to us, and our responsibility was to run the prison, the detention facility where we detained 2,500 terrorists, and then to mentor the Afghan judicial system from the Supreme Court down through the districts. So my job was to help the general make sure everything was in place, and just that responsibility of working through a really hard problem for our government. The Obama administration gave my boss a call one night and said, hey, we need you to help us take this detention thing off of the news. We want you to turn it over to the Afghans, and you have about 6 months to do it. So just doing something big for the nation is kind of a nice thing to say, hey, I participated in doing that.
Yeah. When I got out of the service, I went straight into college, straight into a community college, and it was kind of like a culture shock, having some of the similar, not the level of a, sergeant major or even a first sergeant, but having some pretty incredible experiences, good and bad, in the military, and just different experiences than I think the general populace gets here at home in the United States. And that was something that was really challenging for me, is relating to people who really weren't that much younger than me in that situation, school and going to college, and very just different life experiences. So that really shaped my perspective on life. I would imagine 35 years of service in the military had some pretty significant impact on yours, your perspective on life, but also your leadership style and just your communication style. I guess, can you elaborate on how that impacted you once you got back home?
I think you can always describe that for folks that were in the service, there's a little bit of discipline that you gain. What the thing I always said about the Army is, all you had to do to be successful is show up at the right place, at the right time, in the right clothes, and work hard. So if you think about those four things, those translate just about anywhere. And I think when a veteran comes out of the service, those are attributes that really are helpful. And I don't think I'm any different than any other veteran from that perspective. Because I did get to lead large formations while I was in the service, and they were multi-service, so not just soldiers. I did gain an appreciation for the value that each member brings to a particular team. Everyone's uniquely different. So as I came out of the service and went to work for a bank that's right next door to where we are right now, I really was able to take that notion that everybody can contribute in a unique way. So my leadership style developed into one that tried to help everyone be successful in the organization and to do good for the company as a result.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, because especially when I got out, I was focusing maybe too much on all those differences between my experiences and the others, but really, like you mentioned, the collaboration of those experiences really can make a team more effective, because just because I went to the military and had those experiences doesn't mean somebody who stayed home and had different experiences doesn't make their experiences any less valuable. And oftentimes when you're problem solving, having both sets of experiences makes a better solution.
But like your college experience, my culture shock wasn't at that time going into the military. It was the coming out part, right? I mean, you live in society when you're in the service, but at the same time frame, this notion of leaving that warm, cozy blanket that was the Army and heading out into the big, cruel world, that for me was a little bit of a culture shock, given that I'd spent my whole adult life doing soldier stuff.
Yeah. Well, you brought it up, so now you got to elaborate on it. That transition out of the military can be pretty difficult for veterans across the board. So what specifically, I mean, I hear the culture shock, but was there more that was difficult with your transition out?
I think it's fair to say that not every transitioning service member is the same. We all come with our unique set of issues, real ones and perceived ones. But at the same time, there's this notion that we all have to transition in some way. My transition experience was a fairly positive one, but I recognize that that's not always the norm. I think when you're leaving the service, there's this triangle that you work through, and it's are you going to make your new life based on a location that you choose? Are you going to make your new life based on a particular job or title that you're looking for? Or the third one, are you going to make that transition based on a particular salary that you're trying to achieve? And one of those things in that triangle outweighs the other two. Right, so you have to make this balance and try and make all of that fit. Mine was location was the overarching factor. So what do you do when you spent your whole life doing intel with a top secret clearance, and you've chosen to go to Billings, Montana? So I did some things prior to transition, went back and did some additional schooling to do something, gain some portable skill. And for me, that was choosing accounting as a pathway to allow me to live wherever I wanted to. So my experience really was shaped for what could I do anywhere, and drove things for me. So it was a decent transition.
If you had advice that you could give those other service members that are maybe starting to look at that transition out of the military, maybe they're already in the process, what would it be? Okay. I think it's you've got to take ownership of the process yourself. The services each have a transition program. Ours, the Transition Assistance Program in the Army, was pretty well put together. And I would tell a service member now, go through the program, but what you put into that is what you're going to get out of it. So if your expectation is, we've built a program that's going to take care of everything for you, and you just have to follow the steps and you end up with success, which is how the Army is set up, then you're not going to be successful. You have to put a lot of thought into it, and I guess it's 1.5 things. You have to spend some time trying to figure out what some of your goals are. If you don't provide a little bit of direction for yourself, then I think you can wander aimlessly for a while until you find some resource to help you get that back on path. Yeah, I think that through Veterans Navigation Network, the work that we do, that's a common theme that we see with veterans struggling with that transition, is that in the military, you wake up every day and you have your purpose, whatever it may be. And sometimes it's, cleaning out the arms room. The next time it can be training Afghan police how to, do what they do. And it varies, but at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, you know what your mission is for that day and that purpose. I think a lot of transitioning service members lose that purpose, or they don't know what it is when they get out. And so that's where I think there's a lot of resources, like you mentioned, like VNN, but there's other resources out there that can help with finding that purpose again. One that I know that you're involved with is the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Can you talk a little bit about the VFW and what motivated you to become a part of it?
So now that I'm really retired, I also am going through a new round of figuring out what my goals are, right? And one of those that I've been able to start to realize over the past few years is the VFW. The Veterans of Foreign Wars Service Officer Program is what helped me when I was leaving service do my Veterans Affairs medical claims and help me through the VA process. It's free, right? You know, a veteran shouldn't have to pay for support to get their VA stuff done. So the VFW provided that. I was not a member at the time. But as I was coming to Montana, I thought, you know, I can give back to the VFW for what they helped me do just by participation and attendance. You know, the VFW's got 9,000 plus posts around the world, mostly in the U.S., but around the world where service members are. We have 3 of them here in Billings, which I find a little odd, but at the same time frame, I think there's a lot of need. So 3 posts here in Billings isn't a bad way to do it. I serve as the Quartermaster at my post, right? So I do the finances. Kind of fits in with what I chose to retool my portfolio when I left the service. So I'm able to give back in a fairly positive way there. The VFW is a great organization. You know, at the national level, it provides a lot of advocacy in Congress. The same at the state, and maybe less so at the local level. I think that's something you and I are trying to do a little bit more of. The thing that folks don't understand about the VFW posts is many of them are open to the public. And I would say one of the challenges of our post is that, you know, folks think you have to be a vet or a member to go in there. Right. You know, so I encourage anyone, if you want to help the VFW, there's a couple of ways to do that. On Memorial Day and Veterans Day, when we're all standing out in front of Walmart or Albertsons or Shipton's Big R, handing out those poppies to help remember a vet, you know, throw a little bit in the jar. That's how we pay for veteran support programs. It all stays local and allows us to help individual veterans who find themselves in some poor circumstances and need a little bit of financial assistance. But to keep the post running and the organization healthy, we just need folks to go in and patronize the bar, right? So going into that building and spending a few dollars helps us pay all our bills, and then all the things that go in through our relief fund, we're able to then help veterans in the local community.
Yeah, I think when I first got out, that's all I thought the VFW was, you know, a bar. I didn't realize all the things that they do in the community to have positive impact. You know, there's a lot of community events that they do that just bring people together. I think another common thing that veterans miss out on when they leave the service is the camaraderie. And I think there are a lot of opportunities for that camaraderie at the post. The VFW has come through numerous times when other organizations or other people in the community have not, for the financial assistance that you've mentioned. And it's not just for the veteran either. There's the auxiliary. So if a family member wants to get involved and help, there's an auxiliary where they can join. And the auxiliary is also open to veterans who weren't veterans of foreign war. So anybody really that's interested in joining the VFW can, either through the auxiliary or the post. Is that right?
I guess that makes the VFW maybe a little more, a little bit different in eligibility, as you mentioned, is this serving in foreign lands or, you know, against conflicts. Our partner organization that is open to all vets is the American Legion, and also does some great things. But as you mentioned, you know, we have a fairly large auxiliary and family members of those who served in foreign conflicts. And their service member doesn't have to be a member of the VFW. You know, a family member can join the VFW auxiliary regardless. Yeah. We do a breakfast the first and third Sundays out there on Anchor Avenue at 637 Anchor Avenue. So if you want to come out and at least see what we're about, that's a nice, friendly environment to come out and spend a little time. If the bar scene's not your not your thing, or if you see we're advertising something on the media for an event, just come out and support. You know, the veterans love to interact with others. We interact with ourselves, and it's nice to have members of the public in our facility.
Yeah. You know, and that's 637 Anchor Avenue in Billings, Montana. For those who are not in our community that are watching, we've gotten to partner through Veterans Navigation Network with the Post on a few different events. We've had barbecues up there, and I can't remember if that's where we met. Was it not necessarily through the VFW? I guess I do remember it. Not necessarily through the VFW, but we met, and since then you've decided to volunteer with Veterans Navigation Network. So can you talk about a little bit about how we met and what drove you to starting to volunteer with our organization?
So one of the things that is very important to First Interstate Bank, where I worked, was this notion of community service. Right, so everyone is encouraged to do something. So I decided that, you know, because I was a resident initially up on the High Line up in Valley County, I knew very little about what Billings had to offer when we chose Billings as our final location. So I joined the board at the Billings Community Foundation, just so that I could learn the atmosphere here in town and, you know, get a sense of the landscape and how I might want to contribute locally. One of the things that BCF encourages you to do is establish a donor advised fund. And those donor advised funds allowed me a way to provide some philanthropy while I was working for various causes. So I would sit on the grant committee and help disperse, you know, our money and other endowments that we were managing, and I decided that I did want to focus on those 501c3s that supported veterans organizations. So initially I did, we did some philanthropy with Dog Tag Buddies, with Horse Spirits Healing, and then one of those that came across in a grant application was the Veterans Navigation Network. And just reading what the idea was and what you were trying to accomplish as the founder of the organization sounded very, very positive. So it was initially, you know, my connection was financial with your organization, but as you got closer to VFW or your organization ran events that we participated in, that's how we initially met. We've been able to drag you on to our leadership team out at the VFW, so thank you, Blake, for your individual participation with us. You have a very you have a good story on why it's important for VNN and for others that didn't have maybe the transition help that I did, or the luck that I had as I was doing my transition. You're a hard person to say no to. You should take that as a good personality trait. So recently you asked me to take on this peer mentor program. You know, I think there's lots of veterans out there that can use peer mentors. It's, I think, hard to find the right connection types for those relationships. I didn't accept the first couple that your team presented to me. I think it's important that you get a good fit. Yeah. You know, I have some unique experiences that also can come in helpful, and I just started with a peer in the past month, and so I've had 2 meetings already. Sometime maybe I'll take on more, but initially I want to get this right. I received the benefit of mentorship through the American Corporate Partners. I didn't know I academically had done that accounting thing, but I didn't have any practical experience. So they partnered me up with a controller from American Paper in Mississippi. And I had a mentor for a year that I could bounce my resume off, bounce ideas off, get some help from. So your program reminded me of, hey, I got some benefit from that. Maybe I should give back in a similar way. Now that I'm not working full-time, this goal of providing support to other veterans just through mentorship, I think, is something I want to do for a while. And we'll just kind of give it a go and see how it happens. VNN does a lot of other good things besides their mentorship programs. You know, you mentioned we help at the VFW with financial help with some vets. Your organization is much the same way. You work very hard to ensure that people know what resources are out there. One of the most powerful things with VNN is this network you've built with organizations in central and eastern Montana. I mean, you serve more than that area, but this idea of trying to corral resources in one place, it's as much for the organizations to know how they complement each other and where help is. It's not, designed to deconflict or, make sure every resource is provided. It's as much education for the folks that participate. And then that trickles down. It should flow down more, but it trickles down to individual vets out there that bump into us in one shape or form, and then realize that there's more resource out there.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the matches through the mentoring program, and I think what you elaborated on is not accepting the first few. That's okay. Like we want to make sure that there is a match, both for the veteran, but also for I guess they're both veterans, but for the mentee and the mentor, because you're right. If that relationship doesn't mesh very well, then a lot of times that can hinder the growth or the progress for the vets. So we definitely do look for mentors that are willing to say, no, this isn't a good fit. And we ask the mentees to say the same if it's not a good fit for them. And we do regular evaluations to make sure that it is a good match and that progress is being made. So I appreciate you bringing that up because I think it's very important.
The hard part, I guess my criteria, I don't think it's too high, but maybe others do. It's this notion of, I'd like to work with a vet who's trying to help themselves, right? So if you're a vet out there that's needing assistance, my expectation as a peer mentor is you're going to put some effort into it, right? So if you're just looking to be fed everything, those are hard relationships to help make work. There has to be a little bit of something to grab onto. And it just is motivation, it's potential, it's this desire to make yourself better. So that's who I was looking for.
Yeah. We've covered a lot of topics. We're kind of running out of time, but I guess if you were to think about kind of what legacy or what you want to leave behind as far as the work that you're doing with volunteering, with the VFW, with Veterans Navigation Network, I guess what would that be? What would you say to encourage others to get involved in things like that?
Legacy, I think, for an enlisted service member should never be about their name on the side of a building, right? I always felt like the best thing I could do for the Army is the day I left, they were able to function and not notice that I was gone, right? So I do and have transferred that thought into what I want to do in the veterans community. I think many times you can get caught up in living your story. It really is about just helping other vets. And if you do it right, they succeed and go on, and they'll remember you a little bit, but it shouldn't be about you. I mean, that's what that true volunteer service is about. Right. So how do you do that in a way that provides value? Helps individual folks in need. I'd like to be able to look back and go, yeah, there are some folks out there that are doing well from having had the interaction with me. We're working very hard in our organizations to prevent suicide. So anytime you can intervene in a way that keeps us from heading down that dark path, I think that there's some great reward there. Yeah. Just this life of service that I've chosen, this is just an extension of that, in a local community way, vice in a big national way.
Yeah. Well, I definitely thank you for being willing to talk to us today about that life of service. I can't thank you enough, both for the financial support you've given to our organization and other veteran serving organizations, but also the time, because time to me almost is more important, because once you spend it, you're not getting it back. And I think that the fact that you're willing to spend that time, as are a lot of people in our community, is so incredibly important. So I just want to thank you for that. And if anybody watching wants to get connected to people like David, or to organizations like you mentioned, Dog Tag Buddies, Horses Spirits Healing, Veterans Navigation Network, all of these organizations, the VFW, that are doing things for veterans in our community, you can reach out to Veterans Navigation Network at veteransnavigation.org. We'll connect you to whoever is the best fit for you, whether that's in our program or another, because at the end of the day, we want to see veterans in our community succeed. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.